the first shows that I worked was down here, man, around Houston.
Remember what
all over
locations you
Texas.
worked here in Texas?
Well, I worked Houston, I worked...
Behind Graceland's walls, Elvis Presley kept a journal no one was meant to see. Locked away for years, it carried the untold truth of the man behind the legend. Today, the journal is finally open, and its pages reveal secrets that shake every illusion. The king who electrified the world with his music was quietly drowning in sorrow, battling shadows no one knew. His words are tender, aching, and painfully human. It is not a diary of a superstar. It is the final voice of a man yearning for peace. What it reveals will leave you shattered. The hidden will of Elvis Presley. The sledgehammer struck the wall with a steady rhythm, each blow echoing through the empty halls of the old Jameson and Associates law firm. Marcus Williams, a renovation worker in downtown Memphis, had been swinging that hammer since sunrise. To him, March 15, 2024, was just another workday, another job of tearing down partitions and clearing space for new tenants. The building, built in 1923, carried the weight of a long history. Its walls had seen generations of lawyers and clients pass through. Marcus thought of it as nothing more than brick and plaster waiting to be broken down. He expected to find dust, broken wood, or maybe forgotten tools left behind decades ago. But with one sharp strike, everything changed. The hammer sank deeper than expected, and behind the wall, something metallic rang out. Marcus paused, frowning. He reached for his flashlight and shone it into the gap he had opened. The beam revealed something that did not belong in an ordinary wall. A steel safe about 2 feet square sat embedded in the darkness. It was unmarked, cold and mysterious, like a silent secret waiting to be uncovered. At first, Marcus thought it was some kind of building equipment, maybe part of the structure. But the longer he looked, the more he realized this was deliberate. Someone had hidden it there. Someone had gone through great lengths to cover it so smoothly that no one knew it existed. The building's owner was called. He came rushing in, confusion written across his face. He knew nothing about a safe. Records of the property dating back to the 1920s mentioned no such thing. The mystery only deepened when a locksmith examined it. This was no relic from the 1920s. It was a high-end model from the 1970s, modern, heavy, and meant to stay sealed. Whoever had placed it there wanted it hidden for a very long time. Finally, after careful work, the safe gave way. The room grew quiet as its door swung open. Inside lay not jewels, not money, but a stack of pristine legal papers. Every page was clean, untouched by time. The documents dated back to 1976, and then came the moment that stopped everyone's breath. Among the papers was a last will and testament. At the bottom was a signature, clear, bold, and familiar. Elvis Aaron Presley. The name hung in the air like thunder. Elvis, the king of rock and roll. A man whose death in 1977 had shaken the entire world. A man whose estate had been ruled for decades by an official will everyone believed was his last word. Yet here, hidden in a wall, was another will. Experts were called immediately. Handwriting analysts compared the signature to known samples. The ink, the paper, every detail was consistent with the 1970s. Even more striking, the document carried the notarization of a Memphis attorney named Harold Morrison. Morrison had passed away in 1978, his passing quiet and forgotten until now. His name suddenly pulsed with meaning. The discovery was staggering. If real, this will predate Elvis's official will by over a year. Its provisions contradicted the estate decisions that had ruled his legacy for nearly half a century, and its words revealed a man far more aware, far more cautious than the world had ever believed. In this hidden document, Elvis spoke with a voice stripped of the showman's glow. He was not the glittering icon adored on stage. He was a father, a son, a man betrayed by those closest to him. He had seen shadows in his circle, felt the weight of hands steering his money and his future without his consent. He had acted quietly, carefully to protect his true wishes. News of the discovery spread like wildfire. Legal offices buzzed, entertainment circles whispered. Every conversation circled back to one question: who had known about this will, and why had it been buried so deeply? The answer lay in the year 1976. While the public watched Elvis dazzle crowds, charm audiences, and sing with unmatched passion, behind closed doors he was changing. He no longer trusted easily. He noticed things, a missing sum here, a strange fee there. His financial world felt like shifting sand. He began to suspect manipulation, even betrayal. And in those days, he found his way to Harold Morrison. Morrison was not a flashy lawyer. He was not the type to mingle in the star's circle or chase fame through his clients. He was quiet, discreet, and deeply loyal. When Elvis reached out, it was not through public channels, but through intermediaries. Meetings happened at night, away from the eyes of his entourage. Morrison kept careful notes. In them, Elvis appeared thoughtful, strategic, and painfully aware of how vulnerable he was. He no longer believed his advisors were working for his good. He sensed they were shaping his empire for their interests. The secret will was born out of that realization. Unlike the official will shaped by advisors, this document was Elvis's unfiltered voice. Every line carried his determination. He wrote of unease over Priscilla's continuing influence even after their divorce. He did not doubt her care for their daughter, Lisa Marie, but he feared she sought a place in his business decisions. He wrote of exploitation. He had seen what happened to estates of great performers. Their names, their homes, their art turned into machines for profit. He wanted no such fate for himself. Most of all, he wanted Graceland to remain a sanctuary, a private, sacred place, not a commercial stage. And then came the heart of his will, his love for Lisa Marie. He feared for her. He feared that when he was gone, those who held power would see her as a path to wealth, not as a child in need of love and guidance. He wanted protections that would shield her, provisions that would raise her by his values, not by ambition. It was not the will of a careless star. It was the will of a father, wary and weary, yet fierce in love for his child. The safe had preserved not only paper, but a man's voice. Through those pages, Elvis revealed his pain, his wisdom, and his deep desire to be understood. He had been betrayed, yes, but he had not been blind. He had been mocked for paranoia, but the hidden will proved his doubts had reason. For decades, the world had accepted the story of Elvis as told by the will made public in 1977. But now a new story emerged, one that had been hidden within a wall, sealed in steel, waiting for light. The battle beyond the grave. The divorce between Elvis Presley and Priscilla Presley in 1973 was presented to the public as a peaceful end to a marriage that had simply run its course. Cameras captured them smiling, hands held loosely, walking together into the courthouse as if they were two friends parting kindly after years of love. To the world, it was a story of mutual respect, a decision made without bitterness. Yet beneath the carefully rehearsed gestures and polished statements lived a far more complicated reality, one that would only come to light years later when a secret surfaced and revealed how fragile the truth had always been. At the time of their divorce, Priscilla accepted what seemed like a modest settlement, $800,000 in cash, occasional alimony, and a mere 5% of Elvis's publishing companies. For Hollywood standards, this appeared small. Observers saw her acceptance as a sign of grace, a dignified bow from a marriage that had once been the envy of millions. Yet the discovery of Elvis's hidden will revealed that this quiet settlement was not the end of her story. It was instead the first move in something larger, a strategy carefully built over years to position herself not as an ex-wife fading into the background, but as the most powerful guardian of Elvis's name and fortune. Within months of the divorce, Priscilla began weaving her way back into Elvis's business world. Though no title marked her role, she became a constant presence in meetings with lawyers and accountants. She stayed in close contact with Colonel Tom Parker, the manager who had steered Elvis's career for decades, and presented herself as someone concerned only with the future of their daughter, Lisa Marie. Slowly, she became indispensable. Elvis's team, once wary, started treating her as one of theirs. The image was flawless, a devoted mother ensuring her child's future. Yet in private, Elvis noticed how much she seemed to know, things she should not have known. Harold Morrison's notes, discovered alongside the secret will, captured Elvis's unease. Morrison, his trusted advisor and lawyer, wrote that Elvis often questioned how Priscilla gained access to sensitive details of his finances. He suspected leaks from inside his circle. To him, it was not only unsettling but deeply personal, as though his life was being quietly mapped out by someone who knew his every weakness. In public, Priscilla remained warm and charming. Behind the scenes, she built alliances, positioning herself in ways Elvis had never anticipated. Phone records later revealed how deep her connections ran. In the months leading to Elvis's death, there was a surge of communication between her and key business figures. The calls were frequent, timed too precisely to be casual. More disturbing were the records of calls between Priscilla and Morrison's office in the days before Morrison's sudden death in 1978. He had been only 42, with no history of heart disease, yet passed away of a heart attack that no one ever investigated. For years, this coincidence lay buried. Only when the secret surfaced did people begin to look back and question the timing, the conversations, and the shadows left behind. The will revealed Elvis's recognition of Priscilla's growing power. Morrison's notes included Elvis's private admissions, his fear that after his death she would rise as the dominant figure, not because she deserved it, but because she had played her role so well. To him, she was the one person who had outmaneuvered him, using sympathy, loyalty, and charm as her greatest weapons. The will, then, was not just a legal document. It was Elvis's final attempt to push back, to draw lines that might protect his name and his work from being reshaped by someone he no longer trusted. What made the secret will so striking was how different it looked compared to the official document that had governed his estate after 1977. The known will placed power into the hands of only a few, creating a structure that could be easily controlled. But Elvis's hidden instructions painted a completely different vision, one of generosity, loyalty, and dignity. He had written detailed provisions for those who had stood by him through every storm. Red West and Sonny West, his loyal bodyguards, were promised $50,000 each, with annual payments for life, a recognition of their years guarding not just his body, but his peace. His core musicians, the men whose hands had carried his sound across the world, were offered the same. To him, they were not just employees. They were family, and he wanted them cared for long after the lights went down. Even those who worked quietly in the background were not forgotten. Mary Jenkins, the cook who had kept his home filled with warmth and flavor, was promised $25,000 and guaranteed work at Graceland for as long as she wished. Lisa Marie's nanny, Pauline Nicholson, was left $100,000 for the education of her children. These were not grand gestures meant for public applause. They were small, deliberate acts of love, acknowledgments of people who had given him loyalty and comfort when the rest of the world demanded pieces of him. The will also showed a side of Elvis few had seen, a man thinking not just of his circle, but of strangers walking a path he knew too well. He allocated $2 million to create the Presley Foundation for Struggling Artists, an endowment meant to help musicians who, like him once, had dreams larger than their wallets. He appointed Jerry Schilling, Larry Geller, and Dr. George Nikopoulos as trustees, ensuring it would be guided by people who understood the heart of an artist, not the cold hands of administrators. His plans for Graceland contradicted everything that happened after his passing. Where the world saw a museum and tourist attraction, Elvis had envisioned a home, private, sacred, and untouched by commerce. In his secret will, he ordered that it remain a residence for Lisa Marie and her family, its upkeep paid through his music royalties. To him, it was not a monument for strangers. It was a sanctuary, a place where his daughter could always find refuge. For Lisa Marie herself, Elvis wrote with a father's foresight. He did not want her to inherit too much too soon. Instead, he placed her share into a trust, providing her with enough to live comfortably but protecting the principal until she turned 35. He even included requirements for counseling and support, knowing how heavy the burden of being his daughter could be. He wanted her to grow into her inheritance with strength, not be swallowed by it before she had the chance to live her life. His vision for his music catalog was just as protective. He banned its use in advertising, in politics, or in cheap compilations designed only for profit. His songs, he wrote, could could only be used in projects that honored his artistry, carefully curated reissues, respectful tributes, or biographical films that carried Lisa Marie's approval. He knew the world would always hunger for his image, his voice, his story, but he wanted to ensure it was never cheapened, never turned into noise for the sake of money. Perhaps the most telling part of the will was his creation of a board to oversee his estate. It was to be made up of 5 people: Lisa Marie, Jerry Schilling, Larry Geller, Vernon Presley, and Priscilla herself. But Priscilla was not to have power over all. She was only one voice among equals. Major decisions mandated a majority vote, a structure designed to keep anyone, especially her, from seizing control. It was Elvis's final safeguard, his way of ensuring that his empire could not be bent to the will of a single hand. Harold Morrison and Elvis's lost will. The winter of 1978 carried with it a silence that spread across the walls of a quiet Memphis office. Behind those walls sat Harold Morrison, a man whose name was rarely spoken in public, yet whose hands had once touched a document powerful enough to reshape the future of Elvis Presley's empire. Morrison was not a celebrity. He was not a singer nor a performer. He was an attorney, discreet and meticulous, and his greatest task had been drafting a secret will for Elvis Presley, a will that held within it the king's most personal hopes and deepest fears. It was February when Morrison's life came to an abrupt and startling end. The world was told it was a sudden cardiac arrest. Just like that, his heart had failed, and with it the only living voice that could confirm the existence of Elvis's hidden wishes. But the truth refused to settle so neatly. The moment news of his death spread, whispers began, whispers that grew louder as shadows deepened around his story. By all appearances, Morrison had been thriving. Early in 1978, his career was blooming. He had new clients, big names who trusted his steady hands. His office expansion plans were already on paper, his secretary Dorothy Hayes keeping track of the endless stream of meetings and calls. Those who saw him in those weeks remembered a man full of energy, confident in his steps, eager for tomorrow. There were no warnings, no ailments, no lingering sickness. A physical exam just months before had cleared him of any health concern. He was in every way alive with purpose. Yet on that February day, Morrison was found lifeless in his office. No struggle, no wounds, only stillness. The cause stamped onto the papers read "Sudden Cardiac Arrest." Official. Final. But Dorothy Hayes knew something was wrong. She remembered his laugh the day before, the files he had stacked neatly for the week ahead. A man preparing for the future does not simply stop breathing. The timing made the air heavier. Elvis had been gone only 6 months, and legal storms were already forming around his estate. Arguments, disputes, and whispered claims circled like vultures. In the middle of it all, Morrison was the single man alive who knew of an alternative will, a will that could turn the estate on its head and strip power from those already moving into position. And now, suddenly, he was silent forever. What followed his death was more disturbing than the death itself. Within days, men arrived at Morrison's office. They claimed to represent his family, but their actions spoke differently. Dorothy Hayes stood by helplessly as they moved through the office like a sweep team. They took not just active case files, but storage boxes, archived records, even personal belongings. Desk drawers, cabinets, safes, all emptied with precision. It did not look like grieving relatives, it looked like a purge. The phones told their story. Records later uncovered showed repeated calls to Morrison's office in the weeks before his death. The numbers traced back to Elvis's official legal team. Even more striking were the calls from a line registered to Priscilla Presley herself. Their frequency suggested worry, urgency, or perhaps fear. Morrison was in the center of something larger, something no one wanted brought into the light. His calendar added another piece to the puzzle. Written in his hand, an appointment was marked for the day after his death. The words were simple: EP estate matter. A phone number followed, one that led to a private investigation firm specializing in document authentication. Morrison had been preparing to confirm the secret will, to bring proof that Elvis's true intentions were more complex than the world believed. Jerry Schilling, one of Elvis's closest friends, would later confess that Morrison had reached out weeks before. Morrison spoke of important information about Elvis's wishes. Schilling, caught in grief and confusion, brushed it off as opportunism. Only later did he realize it was likely Morrison's desperate attempt to keep Elvis's real voice alive. The walls of silence extended beyond Morrison's office. Musicians, staff, and friends of Elvis found themselves cornered. Papers were pushed before them, gag agreements demanding their silence. Threats of crushing lawsuits and endless legal battles loomed if they dared speak of another inheritance plan. They signed, not out of loyalty, but fear. But the most chilling detail of all came not from phone records or files, but from a letter. Before his death, Morrison had written to his brother. In that letter, he spoke of threats. He described strangers watching him, of being followed, of shadows near his home. He wrote of a break-in at his office, his papers rifled through, his work disturbed. And he ended with a warning. If anything happened to him, the FBI should be contacted about documents hidden in his office. That warning was ignored. His letter sat quietly until decades later, when the discovery of Elvis's secret revealed its truth. The hidden will exposed a plan built on love, foresight, and a father's deep worry for his daughter. Elvis had crafted protections for Lisa Marie Presley, protections that were never honored. Under the official will, she inherited her fortune in full at 25, unprepared for the weight of such wealth. But in the secret will, Elvis had carved out a path designed to shield her. At 18, Lisa Marie would have received a steady allowance, enough to live, learn, and grow without drowning in riches. At 25, she would gain access to investment income, a step into responsibility. Only at 35 would she inherit full control, when her father believed she would have the strength and maturity to bear it. Elvis had gone further. He had set aside $500,000 for psychological counseling and life coaching, recognizing that fame is a burden heavier than gold. He wanted his daughter to have guidance, not just money. He had even created an educational trust, funding not only schools but travels across the world. He wanted her to see life beyond Graceland, to walk streets where no one knew her name, to feel the world as something larger than fame. He had chosen guardians for her heart and spirit. Jerry Schilling, named as a mentor, would share the real stories of her father, the laughter, the fears, the man behind the music. Larry Geller, chosen as a spiritual guide, would pass on the beliefs that shaped Elvis's restless soul. And in perhaps the most tender detail, Elvis had written letters. One for each birthday, filled with advice, encouragement, and love. Words meant to walk beside Lisa Marie through every year of her life. These letters were locked away, unseen by her, until decades later. She lived and passed away without ever knowing her father had written them. Instead, reality cut harsh. At 25, Lisa Marie received her fortune in one overwhelming wave. The structures her father designed never reached her. The support he planned vanished with Morrison's death. Her struggles with addiction, with money, with love, echoed the very dangers Elvis had foreseen. Financially, the blow was just as deep. Elvis's secret plan preserved the principal, ensuring steady income across her lifetime. But the official estate allowed sales of assets, even pieces of his music catalog, leaving her fortune vulnerable to collapse. The very security Elvis sought to build was dismantled. The will even carried a lifeline for her darkest days. Elvis had created a fund for treatment and recovery, aware of how close temptation lingered. He had lived it, fought it, and feared it for her. That safety net was buried, erased along with his voice. Decades later, when the secret surfaced, Morrison's death no longer looked like fate. It looked like the first move in a campaign of silence, a deliberate strike to erase Elvis's truest intentions. The cover-up had worked. Elvis's daughter lived a life her father had fought to protect her from, a life shaped not by his guidance but by the absence of it. The betrayal of Graceland. The story of Elvis Presley did not end with his death in 1977. It lived on in whispers, in hidden papers, and in shadows no one dared touch for decades. Buried deep within a locked drawer lay the secret that would one day shake the Presley empire to its very core. That secret was a will, handwritten with love, fear, and hope. And in that will, Elvis left behind not just money, not just names, but the purest truth of what he wanted for the one place he cherished above all else, Graceland. The mansion stood like a symbol of his life, its walls heavy with the echoes of his laughter, his music, and his dreams. For Elvis, Graceland was never meant to be a stage for strangers. It was the heart of his family, a sanctuary where love was supposed to continue long after he was gone. In his private words, written with striking care, he begged that the house remain untouched, safe, and closed from the outside world. It was not for tourists, it was not for cameras. It was for his daughter, Lisa Marie, and the children she would one day raise inside its walls. Every line of that hidden will carried his passion. He described Graceland not as property, but as the soul of the Presley family. He left instructions that the income from his music catalog would forever pay for its upkeep. Money, he made clear, was no excuse to open its gates. He had seen what fame did to other stars. He had seen their homes turned into traps for the curious, their privacy sold for tickets and photographs. Elvis, more than anyone, knew the cruelty of being watched. He feared that even in death, he would not escape it. His words were precise. His belongings, his clothes, his books were not to be touched by strangers. They were heirlooms, gifts for Lisa Marie, reminders of the father who adored her. The meditation garden, where his body would one day rest, was declared sacred ground. No outsider was to ever set foot there. In those pages, Elvis wrote with the conviction of a man desperate to protect what little piece of his life had remained his. But when the king passed away, the truth of his wishes was buried with him. Within 5 short years, the doors of Graceland swung open and strangers poured in. They walked through the kitchen where Elvis had laughed with friends. They filed past the bedroom where he once found rest. They wandered the rooms where he had lived his private life. The sanctuary he had built turned into a spectacle, a museum for curious eyes. The place meant for Lisa Marie's laughter became a hallway for tourists. His most private world became a business. The betrayal cut deep. His secret will showed just how much he dreaded such a fate. He had written clearly that there were to be no gift shops, no tours, no museum halls. Graceland was a home, not an enterprise, yet that was exactly what it became. And the weight of this betrayal was not faceless. Records revealed that Priscilla Presley, the woman who had once shared his life, knew of his wishes long before his death. Phone calls and testimony showed Elvis had spoken to her directly about keeping Graceland private for their daughter. But the choice she made later was not out of ignorance. It was a decision to turn away from his words. The world was told it was about money, that the estate wanted funds, that opening Graceland was the only way forward. But the truth in Elvis's hidden words told a different story. He had already made provisions. His catalog would pay for everything. He even allowed for the home to be sold privately if money ever grew tight, but only under the condition that it remain a residence. Lisa Marie would have the chance to reclaim it when she grew older. Every scenario had been prepared for. Every corner of doubt is covered. Yet none of it was followed. The saddest part of all was Elvis's vision of Lisa Marie's future. He dreamed of her raising her children in that house, of grandchildren filling its halls with laughter, of the Presley bond living under that roof. Instead, Lisa Marie grew up with strangers roaming through her home. Her memories became a commodity. Her father's sanctuary turned into a ticketed attraction. For Elvis, who had lived under the crushing weight of fame, this was the last cruelty. Even in death, he was not allowed peace.